for Cowboy Christmas. Mary Costello, Marcia Prather, and Sue Pearson. And Ben isn't here, but I would like to thank him for setting up the tables for us. That's all important to us. So our program today is going to be some cowboy poetry, country music, and door prizes.
Yeah.
And some people don't like poetry, but just remember, cowboy poetry is just a little story. And I think you will enjoy the poems that we have pulled out today. So saddle up and ride, tighten your cinch, keep a leg on each side, and expect to have a good time. We have poetry from 2 local cowboys and Bill Lyon's uncle, who is out of state. I always admired people that could write cowboy poetry and then get up and recite them. And they'd go 20 minutes sometimes, but they knew them all by heart. And I haven't seen one for a while. I was hoping I could get some live poetry today, but we'll share what's already been done. We're going to begin with 2 poems written by Hap Wilson. Sue Pearson knows this gentleman, so she will share some of his work. Sue?
The mic is cut in and out. We're going to have to eat the mic up there.
Or give it a shake. Shake, baby, shake. There you go.
Oh, okay. First of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Howard Hap Wilson. He was born in Wyoming. Moved when he was a baby. His family moved to Miles City. Spent time in the Air Force and then back to eastern Montana and has wound up in Bitterroot Valley. And I got to know him a few years back when he was helping with the Pantry Partners Food Bank. And he gave me this book one day. I don't know, I guess we were talking about cowboy poetry, or he asked me if I liked it or whatever, and he gave me this book. And so when Carol asked, I gave her some of my poetry books, and she picked out a couple of these. So the first one is Becoming a Cowboy. Becoming a cowboy is not a small task. After learning the skills through your life, they will last. Riding a horse was not all that it took. The things you must know would fill a big book. The desire in your heart would soon teach you how, and when you've learned, they'll say, you've learned cow. The bone-crushing test is the trial you must take as you learn how the Mustangs to break. The bulls are part of the big cattle herd, and bull whacking is one of the tales that you've heard. Mending the fences and pens day by day, splitting rails is a job that just seems to stay. The horse is a part of the cowboy's life, and the cowboy will cherish his horse like a wife. Riding and roping and punching the cow, hard work it does take, and soon you'll know how. To round up, to herd, to sort, and to brand, this teaching will soon make a cowboy a good hand. The lessons to learn are many, you'll see. In your lifetime, a cowboy you'll be. And the other one is Beauty of Montana. I roam through the hills and I roam through the plains. The beauty of Montana is hard to explain. The spring and the summer, the winter and fall, each show forth their beauty to one and to all. The snow-covered pines are a beauty so rare, they capture your heart and take away all your cares. You stare and you gaze, but your heart can't believe all the Montana beauty just seems like a dream. The songs of the doggies have not faded away. Eastern Montana is the place they will stay. They ride and they rope, and those cows they do punch, and during the roundup you'll see a large bunch. Montana is the place with beauty all around. No matter where you look, it's here that it's found. So roam our hills and roam our plains and see what you can see. These times will never leave your heart throughout eternity.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeehaw! If you're moved, you feel free. That would just be me.
Your Bill Lyon's uncle, William Travis, was also a cowboy poet who lived in Wyoming and in Montana, or New York, I'm sorry. He is no longer living, and Bill asked Marcia Prather if she would read a couple of his uncle's poems. Marcia. She's our in-house poet.
Bill told me a little bit about his uncle, and while he was from New York, he did relocate to Wyoming, so he's legit. He was a World War II vet, fought in the Battle of the Bulge, was a songwriter and a poet. Anything I missed, Bill? Sounds like
Tap dancer.
Oh, and a tap dancer.
And a great uncle.
His name was William Travis, and I started to look at William Travis up on the internet, and there's also a very famous William Travis that fought in the Civil War, but Bill assures me that it's not the same person. So there's two poems. The first is called In Old Wyoming. Far across the Mississippi, there's a land so fair and bright, where you see the great artist's painting when the sun goes down at night. The wind sweeping across the prairie sings a song of long ago, as it tells of hardships suffered as they fought the Arapaho. Way up in the mountains, with their peaks covered with snow, there you'll find true nature's beauty, where the pine and aspen grow, where the deer and elk yet wander. Through the years they yet remain like statues on a rocky cliff. They view their vast domain. Where the tumbleweed is rolling and there's sagebrush everywhere, where the days are bright and balmy and there's a lightness in the air. Way out in old Wyoming, many stories can be told by the markers along the Oregon Trail on their way in search of gold. The cowboys with their ponies dressed in jeans and western hat sing their songs to the white-faced cattle as they graze along the Platte. There's a smile upon their sunburned face, and it gets all aglow as they think of all the thrills they'll have at the Frontier Rodeo. When this free life is over, and we cross the great divide, may we find a better heaven there on the other side. We hope we have been branded by the sign of our Savior's love as we await the final roundup from the Master up above. And I read that one first because the second one makes me tear up a little at the end. I read it enough times through, I thought, okay, I think I can do it without tearing up, but I make no guarantees. This is the Cowboy's Request. This poem is written about an old cowboy who was stopped for the night to camp along the trail. Old paint has been turned loose to graze. His saddle and his bedroll are laying a short distance from his campfire where he has prepared his evening meal. Many times during his lonely years, he has had talks with his Lord to tell him of his problems and ask for his divine guidance. He is now standing with his hat in his hand, and his head is bowed as he says, "Dear Lord, I'm just a cowboy, as you can plainly see. Any place I wander in this great wide West is good enough for me. I like to lay my head on this prairie grass, 'neath the light of a starlit sky, and the distant howl of a lone coyote is a soothing lullaby. Never did get much book learning as a student, I'd surely fail. But I've learned the ways of nature by the signs along the trail. My shirt and jeans are tattered, hats a mite dirty too. But for punching and roping cattle, I reckon they'll do. I've now grown old and weary, these long years on the trail. My face is tanned and wrinkled, facing the wind and hail. My vision's getting dimmer. Cooking's getting to be a chore. And the heat from the evening campfire don't seem to warm me anymore. I've read of a place up yonder, a big spread I'm told, where you take in weary cowboys when they're broken down and old. Now, I'm not one to be asking favors, Lord, but when this life is through, let me bring old paint through that pearly gate and ride the trails up there for you."
Nice.
Thanks, Marcia. Well done. The third cowboy poet we're going to feature today is Jim Ross, who was a friend and neighbor of the Costellos. He is now deceased. Mary, would you please come up and tell us a little bit about Mr. Ross and introduce our guest?
Jim was our neighbor, and he died when I think he was 96. But anyway, he got to be a good friend. And when I would go over to see him, he'd be sitting in his chair, and I'd knock on the door and go in, and he'd say, "Come on in." And then he'd say, "Sit down." And so then we'd visit. But he was, he'd had a long life, and he did a lot of things. One of his passions was he really liked the old stuff. So he went even up until the last 6 months. He was still going to garage sales and auctions. And he'd come home with something, you know, and he had so much stuff packed in his house. One of the things that I really loved was all these the little stoves that the salesmen used to carry around, the old kitchen ranges, and he had crocks, and he had, well, you name it. He had it in his garage. He had about 200 bits, and he had bought bits, and he has this marvelous collection, and you go and you just look and look and look. And so, and he had an old car that it was green, and he brought it over and took me on a ride one day, and it was an experience because it sort of seemed like you don't have as much control as you do in the cars nowadays. But anyway, I got to be friends with his daughter, Mary Jane Ross, and she lives real close to me. And when he was writing his poetry, Mary Jane did all the illustrations. So they're just fascinating. His books are out of print, but you can sometimes get one through Powell's or a place like that. And he had a great sense of humor. So Mary Jane was so wonderful to her parents. Her mother died a long time before her dad did, but she did everything for Jim. And Mary Jane is just, I'm lucky to have her for a friend. So I'd like to introduce her now, and she can tell you some about her dad. You have to eat the mic. Oh boy, get back there. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, my dad was born in 1916, and he was raised on a sheep and cattle ranch over near Muscle Shell, Montana. And I went to a one-room school. Then he went to MSU and graduated in ag, and then enlisted in the Army and went to World War II for 5 years in the South Pacific. And when I was young, the highlight of my youth was being able to live on Dad's ranch with them. And he had a big ranch just south of Lake Como. And so that was the best thing that ever happened. But after he retired, he started writing cowboy poetry and reciting cowboy poetry, and that was the love of his life, and something that he really enjoyed, and we all enjoyed it with him. And so I would like to share a Christmas poem that he wrote, and it's called A Christmas of Long Ago. When Thanksgiving's feast was over and the snow started settling in, we youngsters grabbed the catalogs, choosing gifts for the toy bin. What each would like from Santa, always a tough and strenuous task, to pick and choose, eliminate, for the things from him we'd ask. Then we each would write a letter informing him how good we've been, and listing all of our desires from bicycle to bantam pen. Chances are the older ones knew how Santa got his gifts, but we weren't told till Christmas Eve that he would have a change of shifts. He would delay our house call. There were poor kids far away. He first would visit them, give them gifts on Christmas Day. That Christmas Eve we gathered round while Mom retold the Savior theme, played the organ and sang carols, and we made some rich snow cream. Dad had wheat in the granary, 2 teams of horses in the stall, but 14 miles and 2-foot snow was just too tough a haul. He saw money in the future, but now he didn't have a dime. So our orders to old Santa just had to sit and bide their time. 'Twas a few days after Christmas when the snow settled down real neat, just right for winter sledding, so Dad loaded up his wheat. Next morning he left early. That night Santa came our way. Dad said he saw those reindeer heading north with empty sleigh. Well, I don't recall the outcome, what presents each kid got, but we were all smiles and happy with what old Santa brought. When that Christmas comes to mind, I reminisce a set, 'cause there's no doubt it had to be the sweetest Christmas yet.
Thank you, Mary Jane. It's nice of you to come into our church today and share this with us. Mary Costello has a couple more short poems that I'd like Mary to come up now. I should have told you guys to sit up here.
Well, first of all, I'm going to read the Saddle Up and Ride, and it's kind of the introduction to his book called Saddle Up and Ride. And he said, when you wake up in the morning and the birds are all a-twitter, when the sun is just a-rising with the mountain peaks a-glitter, when your body feels like playing, why not make the day a-glitter? So saddle up and ride. If your pony nickers at you when he hears you roust about, if he nuzzles at your shoulder with a friendly brush of snout, sure those odies that you tore him will transform to body clout, so saddle up and ride. When the world is getting to you, life is taking of its toll, there is no better therapy for your body and your soul than to visit with your pony as he canters round a knoll, so saddle up and ride. So another one that I'm going to read to you is actually, it's one of my favorites. And there are a lot of really good poems in his books. One of them was, he was telling me that he had, as a boy, he went out with the sheep and lived in the sheep wagon for all summer, and he did that for 3 summers. Well, he said he got kind of bored about the whole thing because he had to make sure that the woolies didn't have worms and they didn't have this and didn't have that. Well, he was sitting up on top of his horse and he decided to do something different. So he got off on the wrong side and stepped on a diamondback rattler and got bit. So then there's a whole story about what that was. But anyway, this one that I'm going to read you now is, and when he recited his poetry, he did it from memory. So he really prepared, and I suppose that's how they did it at the big competitions. And he had one that was called Old Whitey, so he put on his old hat about like this one of Marvin's up here, and he'd have his white bucket, and it was about his bucket whitey and taking feed out to the animals. But this one that I'm going to read you is called Dear Doctor. I sure hate bothering a man like you, but this cowboy is in an awful stew. I've not penned a note